Hello everyone, welcome to the GeoEcolologist. I am Dr. Krishnanand and you have been watching my videos on geomorphology. So in this session on geomorphology, we are going to learn about the factors controlling landforms development. And also in the factors controlling landforms development, one important thing, that is the scale of or the order of landforms. So let's discuss this in today's session. But before we go ahead, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and do share the videos with others as well. So now let's learn about factors controlling landforms development. Now across all the lectures in geomorphology, we talked about various kinds of processes, various kinds of landforms and its formation. In this lecture, we are going to present a summary of all the factors. But before we go and discuss the factors controlling landforms development, let's understand the basic of this space, time and scale concept in geography. So remember, geographical knowledge has three basic components. One is the space, one is the time, and third is the scale component. And now here, before we go to factors controlling landforms development, let's understand the scale factor. At what order of landforms are we talking about this factor? So order of landforms, that is the scale factor, becomes very much important before actually analyzing the factors itself. Right? So let's elaborate on the scale first and then let's go and discuss the factors that are responsible, that control the formation of these landforms. So going by the scale, the order of landforms which is important. So if you look here, the first order of landforms, right? That is what we say at the macro scale. So what is there? Continents and oceans on the earth, right? So we have learnt about the formation of continents and oceans and various processes associated to it in the previous lectures in geomorphology. Then second order of landforms is the mountains, plateaus, plains, islands, coastal plains and several other aspects of these landforms which are either continental or oceanic in nature, right? So that is at the meso level if you see. And when we look at the third order of landforms, further going down, we see ridges, valleys, bangar, khadar and so many other features that are almost micro level features. So what you do here is you actually start from the first order, go to the second order, then go to the third order. So it's like zoom factor, right? So if you are clicking a picture and then you press zoom, what do? You actually zoom into this. So what are we doing? From continents and ocean, we are zooming into mountains, plateaus and plains. Further ahead, we are zooming into ridges, valleys, bangar, khadar. Further ahead, as much as you zoom, what happens? The scale changes, right? That is what we talk about, the scale or the order of landforms that we need to understand. So why is it important here? It is important because the factors also vary with the scale, as we say, right? So we are talking about factors related to landforms or controlling landforms. So we must understand what order of landforms are we talking about. And accordingly, these factors will also vary in the process of geomorphology. So if you see macro processes like orogenetic, epirogenetic that we learned, then we saw folding and faulting at next level, and then erosional and depositional feature further. And so this is what we see is that different factors are important at different scales, right? So this is how scale is important, not just space and time framework. So remember, whenever we are talking about factors controlling landforms, the first thing is we must discuss what order of landforms and accordingly what is the order of process. So this is how process and form relationship become important whenever we are studying geomorphology. So now let's elaborate about the factors. So the first question that comes here is, why do landforms develop? And the second is, why is the surface of Earth uneven? Now these are the two questions whenever we talk about landforms development. These two questions are the basic. So let's understand this, that Earth's crust is a dynamic entity. It is not fixed. It is dynamic. It keeps changing even vertically and horizontally. We have learned from interior structure to isostasy to plate tectonics to continental drift. So many things we have studied in geomorphology which tells us this fact, which clarifies this point that Earth crust is dynamic, right? And internal energy originated from within the earth, that is what we say is geothermal energy or geothermal gradient, is not equal all over the earth's surface. So remember, geothermal energy is not equal everywhere on the earth. It is different at different places, right? So internal forces that build these type of surfaces like So this is what is different, and that's why you see different landforms. This is one of the major reasons that we see, right? Because internal forces actually reflect as landforms on the external surfaces, as we have learned in the previous sessions as well. So what further happens is that the Earth's surface is further affected by external forces as well. So one factor was coming from within. Now external factors are also there, beginning from the sunlight or insolation itself, right? So time to time what happens? External forces such as weathering, erosion, mass wasting, these are called denudational processes, as we have learned before. So denudational processes also impact and therefore changes the structure of landforms with time factor, right? So that is important. So how can we say this? Through example. Over time, what happens? Due to external force, mountains change to hills and at last it is converted to plain. So remember division cycle of erosion, what happens, right? This is what we see from this particular height, gradually through erosion and denudational processes, what happens? This again goes to this particular base level, right? So this is what we talk about, that this lowering of surface keeps happening, and that's how landforms are modified or changed. So this is important in terms of evolution of landforms. So now what is important is that two kind of factors, internal pressures or internal forces, right? That is geothermal gradient. That is the first point, and the second is the external forces that we learned, right? And intensity of external and internal forces is not same all over the earth, and that is why earth's surface is not even. That's why there are different landforms at different places. It all depends upon these internal forces and all the external forces and its balance, right? That is how different landforms are shaped differently on the Earth's surface. So now let's look at the list of the factors that control the landforms development, or what we have already learned in various theories of landforms development, these factors. So what are the numerous factors? Almost 8 factors can be listed straight away. What is this 8 factors? Rock composition and parent rocks that we say. So rock composition, why is it important? We are going to discuss that in detail. Remember, parent rocks, they are already called parent because they are the source, they are the beginning, right? From where evolution starts. So that is the parent rock material, its composition, right? Then what we have is a relief. We also say topography. How much is the height, how much is the altitude, how much is the variation on the surface. Then what we have is geological structure. Now whenever we say geological structure, it's about the internal forces that dominate. Geology is about the internal part of the earth, right? So we talk about what? The process of folding, faulting, plate tectonics, movement of plates, and energy coming from within the surface, right? So that is important. Then what we have is climate, which is external completely to the surface of the earth. Then we have exogenetic agents like wind, water, ice, right? So these are the factors that we say. Then what we have is the energy factor. So remember, main source of energy is the external insolation factor, but the internal energy, that is the geothermal energy, also comes on the Earth's surface as well. Apart from that, we have biological activities that also lead to modification or evolution or development of these landforms. And 8th factor, that is we human beings. So human beings through their activities also transform or control landforms. So these are the 8 factors. Now let's elaborate further more. So first important point, as we learned, was rock composition or parent rocks, its nature. So what happens? Landforms development depends upon the texture. Now it is important, is it coarse, right, or is it smooth? The texture, such as size of the rocks, composition such as rock may be made up of grains or particles. So this is what is the primary thing that is important. For example, if you see that quartz, which is slowed in terms of erosion and weathering process, it is harder. That's the reason, right? But limestone, remember, limestone is softer, it is soluble in water. So what happens? More weathering and erosion happens in limestone. So quartz and limestone can be taken as examples, right? So particular rocks are resistant to one and non-resistant to the other weathering agent. Remember, it may be resistant to one weathering agent. If weathering agent is water, it may be resistant to water, but this may not be resistant to water. So this is where there is a differences on the basis of its composition, and that's how the rocks of different composition will have different shapes, right? So that is important to remember. Now, second factor is the relief factor. So here, relief is talking about the altitude, the high, the lows, right? The elevation in the areas. So remember, more relief is prone to erosion, as we see. If you look into this particular image, what is happening? This mass wasting phenomena, landslide is happening. And remember here, relative relief is higher. right? So landforms develop in different context in terms of relief. So landform development is faster in Himalayan region than Aravalli region. Why? If this question is asked. So why is Himalayan region landforms faster in terms of evolution and development? Because there is more relative relief and wear and tear is more, weathering and erosion is more in comparison to the more stable Aravalli region, right? So that is important to remember. So more relief means more gravitation force, different angles, right? And remember, we have already talked about this factor, that different angles means different gravity pressure, and accordingly it will change. So if angle is steep, it means there will be more wear and tear on the surface and mass movement will be triggered, landslides will be triggered, and in the course it will lead to the change in the landform, right? So that is important. Then is the geological structure, and remember all these features we have studied in details in the previous lectures on folds, fault, orientation, inclination, declination, presence or absence of joints, hardness or softness of the rock, then chemical susceptibility. So remember, if you see this fold structure, right? So what happens? This is about the geological processes, right? That is like plate tectonic process or folding process. That is what is important. Then what we have is the exogenetic agents or exogenic agents like water, air, ice, current, that is ocean current, waves, tides. Remember, these are external factors that actually influence the evolution or development of landforms. We have learned about all these processes in different forms. So remember, fluvial geomorphology, aeolian geomorphology, all those processes. So fluvial, karst, aeolian, coastal. So all these processes are part of the exogenic agents, and they have different erosional landforms and they have different depositional landforms. So that is what is important to remember. Then come to the fifth point, which is climate. Now climate has different attributes like temperature, humidity. These are the two major factors that actually determine the landform. So high humidity enhances the chemical and biological weathering. We have already learned in details about it. And remember what happens? High precipitation and high wind speed. If wind speed is also high and precipitation is also high, enhances erosional activities because these are the agents of erosion. High temperature variation leads to rocks expansion and contraction and thereby weathering of the rocks. So there is a change in shape as well. Then as a result, what we see, rock disintegration happens and there is a change of landform. So see, climate itself as an external factor with its agents like temperature and humidity fluctuations becomes one of the major driving forces or controlling factors. So the process and intensity of landform development vary in different climatic regions because of this factor. So different climatic regions will have different kinds of landforms according to the intensity of its precipitation and temperature, which is not uniform all across the surface of the earth, as we know, right? Then comes the sixth factor, which is energy factor. So it can be either internal energy, which is geothermal, or external energy, which is part of the solar energy, right? So temperature variations, air force, pressure variation, this is part of external energy, which is basically on the basis of insolation received. And remember, internal energy is the convergent energy or the cycle that continues from the mantle to the crust, right? The convection cycle, right? So this is what happens, and we have already learned about this in isostasy as well, right? So energy is one factor that also determines the structure on the surface. Then comes the biological activity as the seventh factor. And remember, biological weathering, we have already learned in details in the weathering lecture. So the presence of vegetation has both the factors. It increases the process of chemical weathering as they release the acid and humidity to the rocks. That is one point. And also absence of vegetation. If vegetation is not there, it increases the chances of erosion. So in both the ways, biological activities take place. And apart from that, we have already learned that faunal activities as well, the animals as well, like burrowing animals, they dig holes, they get inside, sometimes they die, they secrete acid. So what happens? They also change because of this factor, that they tend to disintegrate the rocks. And when rocks disintegrate, with time what will happen? They will also start to erode, will start to move from their places, right? And that will lead to the eventual change in the landforms. And last but not the least, the human factor. We already know that we have changed the entire surface of the earth with time in just 11,500 years ago, since when we started doing agriculture, right? So through agriculture, through dam building, through infrastructure building, brick making, and so many other activities that we carry on in different landforms, right? In different areas of the earth, what do? We actually transform these landforms. How do they look naturally? So what we do? We make natural to anthropogenic landforms, and this is a journey that is happening right now. So that's where human agents are important as well. So now, when we have discussed about the various factors that control the formation of these landforms and also lead to the evolution or the change across the globe, in the sessions to come, we'll be talking more on physical geography. So stay tuned, stay safe, and all the best wishes.